Hello, hello. I am Inarra Griffyn, and I'm the founder of the Queen's Pleasures. And this is an interview with my friend and colleague, Dr. Joe. I call her Dr. Joe, but she's actually the mind, body, and soul doctor. She's not conventional and she's very unusual. And today we're going to be speaking about everything to do with keeping it sexy all the way through the menopause. So maybe you'd like to say a little bit about yourself, Joe?
Yes, hello. Thank you for having me and inviting me. So I grew up in Holland and then I did my medical training in Belgium, but then ended up in the UK. And I did my GP training, which is family doctor training in the UK here in Cornwall and Devon, and had a family and had quite a fulfilling life and career, but was always interested in holistic side of things. But within the system, that could be quite hard to use because there's only limited time and there's only limited interest from people. So eventually, a few years ago, personal circumstances became trickier, and we had a daughter who came out of school, and all the circumstances changed to the degree where I really felt, along with the menopause coming along, that actually my path was being redirected and I needed to really embrace that holistic perspective more fully and not just try and squeeze it in to the system that doesn't really allow it. So I then expanded and I have founded the Body, Mind, Soul Doctor, and I'm now doing that work separately and trying to make that my business and my real calling, actually. So I have done 20 years of conventional medicine, but now really embracing the whole multidimensional side of the human experience.
And I got it wrong because I said mind, body, soul, and you are
Everybody
actually
does
on.
that.
Yeah, forgive me. It's because that's the one that everybody says, right?
That's why I used a different one, because I feel that my entrance point is the body with my medical training, and then we go to mind and soul. So
Well, let's dive in. I would like to talk a little bit about, as this topic is all about Valentine's Day, and you ladies who are out there maybe feeling like your libido has disappeared or something. I want to talk a little bit about the myths that I had aiming towards the menopause, especially entering that. Mine is finished. I'm done. And I didn't dry up. And I want to say that because I actually believed that there were a series of things that would happen. One was, I'll go back a little bit. I always had an amazing experience with my menstruation. For me, it was a heightened experience. And because I follow so much of the moon, I'm an initiated high priestess of Wicca, and of Avalon. And so I had this deep connection to women's sensuality and also to the cycles and the rhythm. And I had a really pain-free experience with menstruation. So for me, when I was tapping into the power of menstruation, it would always be like a heightened experience of great information coming through, physically feeling like I was surrendering, and all sorts of things like that. So when I had these friends of mine who were older than me telling me, "Oh, you wait, it's gonna be horrendous, and then you're gonna dry up, you're gonna have no sex life whatsoever, you're gonna have no passion, no desire." And for me at that time, I wasn't in a relationship and I was looking for, the passion of my life. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going into like dry times just when I'm looking for this amazing relationship. And it wasn't true. It simply wasn't true. So let's talk a bit about these myths that we have floating around about the menopause.
yes, so I will tell you from my personal perspective and my professional perspective. So I think you are, in a sense, ahead of the game, or you were ahead of the game because you have always embraced your cycle. Now, that's something that I wasn't really taught at medical school, and it wasn't really taught by friends either. So it wasn't really even on my radar. And I think a lot of women are in that place. It's changing, luckily, and I'm empowering my daughter to embrace her cycle. But a lot of my friends and a lot of my patients and a lot of my colleagues are still raised with cycle is kind of an inconvenience. And if there is any problems with it, the best way to deal with it is hormonal, hormonal contraception, hormonal treatments. And if you're not embracing those, if you're not accepting those, you're being a little bit of a hippie. And so it's only when my perimenopause started and I really dove into all of these things that I was like, ooh, I've only got a few years left. I better try and embrace it now, because otherwise I won't even have had that experience. Because actually what I've done is I went onto the pill very young and it suited me. It was easy. It made me function better in a masculine world, I think. It made me, I was always easygoing, but it made that probably my emotions were slightly flatter, and my ability to just push through and keep going to do medical training was also enabled through that, because it's basically just stopped my own cycle, my own ovulation, and it overrides that with a steady amount of hormone. And then I had children. I came off it, got pregnant quite quickly, so really didn't experience full cycles. And then that was a whole other initiation, of course. And then went back onto contraception and then had a coil fitted. And eventually, at like 45, I was like, oh my word, what have I done? I need to be free of this. So, and I think that's probably a lot of people's experience. And the people who have had lots of difficulties with their periods, for example, which there's a lot of reasons that might be the case, and that have tried hormonal methods like contraception and then found that that wouldn't agree with them because their bodies rejected it, they've been a bit lost. So they've ended up having to cope with difficult periods or, these difficult problems, but not that much support out there. And that's the kind of thing I'm really passionate about changing. And there is more and more women. There's the Red School that's doing an amazing job at educating women better about this. And there's more and more voices speaking more and more loudly about the benefits of following your cycle. Because if you have done that, then you will recognize the menopause or the perimenopause as a premenstrual phase, effectively. Nothing wrong with it. But if you're not if you're not evaluating what you've been up to at the height of your cycle, which was your middle of your life, your mothering phase, if you're not prepared to look at that, because that's what the premenstrual phase asks us to do with the progesterone rising, go draw inward, evaluate, then you're going to bump up against a lot of issues. And that's, I think, what a lot of women are finding. And then the only solution that is presented to them, if it's difficult, really difficult, is to give yourself the hormone back, because, that's what we've always done and learned. So I think that's where I'm now, having seen that, lived through it and seen that it doesn't actually work for most people, and seen how there's so many misunderstandings about what it means to have PMS, difficult, heavy periods, cystic ovaries, all of these things. These are all labeled as medical problems. And I've come to realize that they're not. They are simply expressions of a system out of balance. And if you address that earlier on, you will also have an easier ride, but probably a menopause. And yes, the dryness is, I've not experienced it actually, but I know a lot of women who are and have, but to me, that's just an expression of a certain element or a certain part of this hormonal change that obviously in everybody's different. So everybody has certain symptoms that will be more prominent, and they indicate an imbalance of some sort. So that's how I like to work with it, rather than focusing on, oh, it's terrible, or it's a symptom, oh, it's all meant to go downhill from now onwards, because that's all nonsense, really.
Well, I think it's also based on the culture of just only being interested in youth, right? And women get the hit on that
Yeah.
100% more than men. It's all like, youth is the way forward. It's exciting, etc. But when we start, well, I'm going to speak into a very different way of being, because as a high priestess and that training that I've had, it was all about the seasons of life, really, and it was in the context of reincarnation. So the context was you're doing a cycle very much like nature. There's youth, it's all appropriate. There's youth, then there's mother, then there's, well, this is the bit that really is out of whack. We go to crone, which is ridiculous. It's actually completely insane based on modern life, because people live way too long to be crones at the age of 50. It's nuts. Crone is more like, I would say, 75 to 90. It's that kind of phase. So we've already got a disjointed view of what it means to be in your power, to be sexy. And we've got, the culture is all talking about youth is the sexiest. Well, that's really interesting, because my experience is that when I was young, I was a mess inside. I was emotionally insecure. In sex, I would never ask for what I want, because I was like, oh my God, I can't even say the words. I can't even say the words of the body part, never mind about the words of what I want with the body parts, because the body parts were all these icky, scientific, and I still can barely get my mouth around clitoris or vulva is one of my most, I can't stand the word vulva. It's like a Volvo. I mean, who came up with these words, right? And then penis. It's like, could you move your penis slightly over to my vulva? Well, you can imagine my first sexual experience was when I was 14, and I had no idea what on earth was happening. It was just because we all wanted to get rid of our virginity. It was like, who can get rid of their virginity first? That was the priority. It was nothing to do with what were the feelings, what was the sexuality. So my experience actually is that um, by the time I've reached almost the latest life now, that's the best sex that I've ever had. And why is that? It's because I ask for what I want. It's because I can communicate, because I'm not embarrassed, because I'm no longer worried about what I look like. I actually don't care on some level. There's a not caring. That comes in with crone energy. Actually, it's the teaching of crone, which is all about, I don't give a toss what people think. I can have an opinion now. I can stand up and be reckless and crazy because I'm already put in that zone of the crazy old woman. Well, crone doesn't really work because, I don't feel like a crone at all. But that's the teachings. After mother, the next phase is crone. And we need to disassemble this both in the kind of ancient way and have a much longer stretch of after mother,
Yes,
which
there's another phase.
there's another phase. And then later when you get to crone, but the inklings of those teachings are right, that you move away from the embarrassment or trying to fit in or trying to be loved or trying to be liked, because you start to get the message that actually you can do everything right and you still won't be loved or liked. You start to develop power. You start to be okay about standing apart and having opinions. And
Yeah.
that's where some of the best sex comes in. And it's around about the menopause, I would say, when women are really in the ultimate power, right?
Yes.
And they still
Oh,
look pretty
totally.
sexy.
It's
Yeah.
it's the liberation, is that phase. And I don't know if you were going to lead to this, but I feel very strongly that in that maiden mother crone, they have skipped over the maga or the wild woman. They've skipped over because the cycle has 4 parts to it, and the season have 4 parts to them. And actually, there is a phase which is the phase of pushing away what doesn't serve, evaluating, and then drawing back in. And that phase, or the autumn phase, the fall phase, is that wild woman phase, and it changes from the archetype of the the maiden, or we call it good girl sometimes because we've been raised as good girls, because we were supposed to step in line and be sensible and sensitive, and and look around ourselves to make sure that we were fitting in. That's the good girl. And then it leads into the good mother, which is this protective, nourishing, selfless person, because there's so much estrogen in the system that she can do it all. She's got the energy, she's got the care within her, and it's this beautiful mother energy which we've revered in our culture, and this religion has helped us with that. And then the wild woman, the one that goes, hang on, and that's coming up when the estrogen drops away in your 40s. And you're like, what? Why am I doing this to everybody? And but our culture then squashes that because it makes us feel like there's something wrong with us, because we're not being the good mothers anymore. And we're not meant to keep being the good mothers forever. That's just a cultural narrative, or that's what you say, the eternal youth, or the eternal, I call it the myth of the eternal summer. Like, we can always be highly energized, highly conforming, highly caring, highly selfless. Hang on, what's happened? Where are we? Where is our personal drive and mission? Because I think to be a crone, you need to release a lot of that which is you've conformed, and maybe rightly so for a while, because that was the phase you were in. But it's no longer that phase. The phase is ending, and it's being burnt away with flashes, hot flashes, and all sorts of symptoms of warmth or heat regulation, and fieriness and anger and rage. And that all comes up because it's supposed to, because you're not really supposed to stay in that mothering, in that mothering or phase. And you're really meant to spend quite a lot of time unshackling, I would call it, getting rid of a lot of these things, so that you can come into your own, and actually you can give the world much more of your own deep truth and authenticity, and liberate your voice. And you can actually give more to the world that way, or it's a different type of giving. But it's more, we like this because it's more Aquarian, it's more unique, but community. You're giving, every unique person is giving to the world what they can, and that actually forms this whole network of all these people doing their own thing, and that feeds into service in a different way. So it's no longer service in a smaller scale, and it's just a different type of giving service. And it does mean that your sexuality changes with that. You're no longer trying to fit it in between all the other duties. You might want to just kind of give it some extra space and time, and create more room for it. And if you allow that, but if you're constantly busy, you remember, sex and libido relies on relaxation and safety. It relies on spaciousness. And if you are super busy with work and with the children and with the socials and with whatever else you're doing, activities and sports and clubs, and then you're not going to have that space, brain space, but also physical feeling of spaciousness and safety to really indulge in it. So I think that's where we all, all this breaking free also allows for more space and more rest to really slow it down. And that's, I think, why there might be a more interest. I've certainly been piqued up by the concept of the tantra, for example.
Yeah.
Because that really goes into that deeper spaciousness, which goes with connection and love and kundalini type energy, rather than the drive, the masculine type of energy.
Well, yes, as somebody we are Aquarian sisters, so that's what we resonate. I've got masses of Aquarius in my chart. I think you do too, don't you?
Yes.
So when I went on my little journey. I think when I was a child, I used to think, when I grow up, I'm going to meet Mr. So and so, and then it will be, and I'll have 2 kids, and it will all be like that. And I have had a life of exactly the opposite of that. Recently, I was talking, just talking on my own Instagram about how we come into this life with different challenges, and we aim and we know that we are coming into this life with different challenges, and every soul will have chosen one area which is more filled with obstacles, or you don't quite get what you want, or you have to try harder because it's the lesson. And for me, I'm very clear it was relationships. And how this rolled out was, I always thought I would just have children and an early marriage, and it would be all of that. So I ended up in serial monogamous relationships, and they would run from 3.5 to 5 years. They were completely monogamous. I loved the person. I thought they would be, when I entered the relationship, I thought they would be the one. And then as we moved along, there was no growth. And usually it was in the spiritual area. 100% top value for me is spirituality. So as I found that they were not coming into alignment with spiritual growth, I would start to move off to one side to get it somewhere else. I would go for the spirituality, not the men. And so I would leave the relationship. I'd be the one that ended it. And then when I was late 30s, I met a man who I thought would have it all. And he had already a 2-year-old child. So I was besotted with this child, and he was with me. And we ended up in this relationship. What I didn't realize was that this guy was a total commitment phobe. So, and still is. It's not that I know what he's doing, but it's like he's hardwired for no commitment. And I couldn't read that because I thought, well, I'm in this relationship and I'm already like a stepmom looking after this little boy who I adore. It's so easy. Why not just then it will be my children? And so as that relationship died, basically I realized I wasn't going to have children. It was like the second knock, because being a bit of a free spirit, I didn't ever want to, hey, now is that the time that we're going to have kids? And I never did that. It was always like this evolving natural evolution. So then roll on. I was devastated about the end of that relationship, and also knowing that I wouldn't have children was a very tough phase in my life. And that was also when I was perimenopausal, or coming up for that. So then roll on. I got through that bit as a single solo person and did a lot of work on myself, and started to realize that there are more solo women that I know than there are in couples, and that many of the ones who are in couples have settled. It's like a thing. It's like an agreement that they make, that they're going to settle because they'd rather, they can't face loneliness. They want to have company. They can't imagine being on their own. And for me, it was like, I can't do second best to be in a coupledom with somebody who isn't hitting these kind of, I could have had all of the previous and kept with them. Why would I then sell out to myself and end up settling for somebody boring, right? And that really is how it rode for me. And I would meet people who perhaps were at the level that I wanted, but they were often married, and therefore I wasn't going to go there. So what happened with that little story, which is I want to introduce my product, which is called the Queen's Pleasure, came directly out of this thinking. I can't even remember how and why I did this, because, for years and years, all I was doing was business coaching. But roll on a personal level, I started to get very interested in, how can I have a ritual to self as a solo woman who is not going to sell out? I'm not looking for company in that way. I don't need to, in British terms, have a shag to just, have some sex. I am the best with myself at sex. So why not make it into a ritual? And this was the kind of the beginning of the thought. And so I created this oil, with, it's an aphrodisiac oil, with a woman in Canada who is a medicine woman. And we created the beginning of a line. Then what happened was the experience of it. Whereas I'd often looked to this area, which is problematic for me, like the relationship thing and trying to have breakthroughs in that. Instead, I looked sideways at business, which I'm really good at, and started to bring my sexuality into the business. This is a really weird aspect, but I think it's worth mentioning. By not focusing on the thing that is the so-called problem, which, I was trying to force or have some breakthrough in, like finding the right man, dating with all these, which was really, truly a disaster. Instead, what I did, because I was focused on this Queen's Pleasure arousal oil, I was starting to use it regularly. And it meant that I was devoting myself to this spaciousness that Joe's just been talking about, the space, the calm, the relaxation to pleasure myself. And I created it for solo women, or I actually created it for women. And even though it works with men and it's great with men, it was aimed at women. Because of this, it's like we don't ritualize our sexuality. We don't allow ourselves the time and the space. And somehow, when you have something like this and you go, not just, hey, I'm going to go play, it's more like, tonight I have the space. I'm creating the space for a ritualized experience of my sensuality. And then you add a few drops on your outer surfaces, and I'll say that word, vulva. Um, they've got to come up with a better one than that. Pussy is my favorite. I started to enter into a whole relationship with myself sexually. And then voila, men started to come who were the right vibe. And so currently in a very, very interesting relationship right now. And I'm not going to say any more than that, except that it's been the best sex I've ever had in my life. At the latest, I am. So
Yes.
thoughts on that?
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, no, I think that's an amazing discovery. And I think it is praise, can't think of the word of, but it's a testament to your dedication to your self development and your evolution that you've kept kind of going, okay, I keep trying, and then there comes a point where it's almost like you need to stop trying. It's like one of those Zen conundrums where at the point where you're like, I've asked the question so many times, I've tried so many times, I don't know where to go, and you make a complete sideways move, and the answer is right there. And I think that's a beautiful story. And it's interesting because my experience is completely different, of course, because my life has been completely different. Because I actually had a wonderful, very gentle, very slow first experience of sex. With a boyfriend, and it took us months, if not longer, and my parents were blissfully unaware because I think I was about 15. And I stayed overnight, and they assumed I was staying in a different bedroom, and of course I wasn't. So it was all very gentle and slow. So for me, I think it's always been quite a safe space, and I've ended up, marrying somebody very loving, very caring, and very warm. So that area has never been, I don't know, it's never been difficult or traumatic or even closed off. So it's just that when you're busy and you've got little kids and life's really full on, that it's hard. You really have to deliberately make space for it. But I think it has changed in the sense that I feel so different now. I'm 50 next, 2 weeks time, 3 weeks time. When this goes out, it'll be about 3 weeks. And my body's still changing. It's going through a complete change. But what didn't happen was that I dried up or that my libido went down. In fact, the more I was embracing and am embracing my holistic side, my spiritual side, my whole self, my expression, my creativity. Last year I wrote chapters in 2 different books. I've been to retreats. I've really embraced sisterhood and collaboration, and I'm obviously doing a whole new business and a whole new profession in a way, or I've expanded what I do. And with that, the I don't know, my body feels even freer, and it feels like I have more access rather than being in my head, which I used to be more of because it's part of my job, I suppose. That's how we were trained. I really have been dropping into my body so much more. And with that comes more sensations and more lubrication. There hasn't been that dryness which is predicted. I think because I've deliberately shifted, and also it comes with Chiron return and all sorts of kind of phases of midlife, where if you really dive into it and look at it face on and dive into the things that are coming up, that your body will respond, and your body will feel happy, and your body will actually be okay with it. But one of the things that I'm really strong and passionate about is that I have slowed down. I mean, I used to do, when I turned 40, I decided to train for a triathlon, and I learned to swim, and I did all that. I did several years of hardcore, not competitive, but just like really squeezing everything out of my body. And suddenly it's not there. I can't do it. The energy is not there. The inclination's not there. And to switch that into complete, think of it, complete submission. No, not submission is not the right word, but acceptance that I'm not meant to go to the gym and pump my muscles at the moment. I'm not meant to push my body physically really hard. But if I don't do that, actually, there is still energy there. And the sexual energy is still going and flowing, providing I am allowing more creativity. I'm allowing more gentle movement in my body, more sensual. I remember in dancing, I still dance. It's that much more feminine movement that allows that flow to continue. So that's kind of more my story, that I've always thought I was, a little bit query, and I was in my head. I was able to think really well, and my body was just a vehicle to get from A to B. And spirituality was always interesting to me, but more as a concept, because I love abstract thinking rather than something that was really embodied. And I think that's the change I've made over the last 4 or 5 years, is that it's become completely embodied. And with that, my body is opened up, even more, and allowing me to work with it, because that's the kind of evolution that I've been able to make listening to it. So that's my part of the story. Doesn't mention your oil, though.
Well, I know you've tried it, but that's a different thing. I think the thing is, it's about this we're talking about Valentine's Day and the ultimate love experience that women want. And often women want to be looked after. That's the safety bit. It doesn't mean anymore, like, I don't want a man to pay all my bills. Sounds like a great fantasy, but I was recently in Egypt, and one of the things that was so interesting was the guy who I'd hired to run he's a luxury tour operator, and I really liked him. It's such a wonderful guy, Omar. And we ended up getting along very well, and he would come on the shoots because I organized shoots for the clients who were there. We did all of these kind of things, and we got along so well. But by the end of it, he said, you have to meet my fiance. And so we arranged that on the final night, and she was super glamorous, this wonderful, fabulous woman who is just gorgeous. And she was saying she was wearing a lot of gold jewelry. She was very stylish, and this sort of Arabic sensual style, which, I really dig. I like it.
Yeah.
But she said to me, one of the things is that the expectation in Egyptian culture is the men pay for everything, absolutely
Okay.
everything for the woman. Well, the other side of that is the woman is completely reliant on the man, right? This is the old order. It's the old order. And I talked to them about that. And Omar was having a heart attack about that thought about in the marriage. Actually, they were going towards it. And I did a reading for them. I did a card reading for them. And we talked about his stress that he experiences. And he was joking, but he was like, she likes gold and she likes a lot of nice things. And I'll be providing that. And I wonder if I can. So that was you see the stress on the men of that old
Mhm.
order thinking, but also the stress on the woman because she is highly intelligent, capable being, and yet is locked into that system where everything is about somebody else doing it for you. So roll on. I had this conversation with them, and then I was reflecting on my own values around that, and I actually thought, well, one of the things that dropped away a very long time ago is I want to earn my own money because I want to earn a lot of it, actually. And some of the guys that I meet are more artistic. That's more my flavor. And so they may not
Finance.
be highly
Yeah.
moneyed. And it's no problem for me. I don't look at them and think, oh, what a bummer. So the more that we build ourselves up to be our own support system in a way, not frenetic like some of the boss energy that's out there, female boss energy, where it's just like a hyper masculine model of everything. Like you go out and you get it, it's all like that kind of thing. But actually, the feminine has arisen for me more when I know I'm capable at certain
Mhm.
things. It's like the masculine energy has got me, but it's my own energy. Like my
Yeah.
masculine structure has sorted out, the flat I live in, the mortgage, the da 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 da, all of the things. But my feminine can so rely on me. I can so rely on myself that actually the feminine has become much, much more of a potent energy in me. It's not relying on somebody else so that I would suddenly feel scarcity if they pulled the plug on something. It's me. And that feminine energy, I think I really relate to nature. And
Mhm.
so I know you do too, and the seasons and the cycles, and just dropping into what is nature teaching us at this time of year. And right now we happen to be in the winter. So there's a reflection and a hibernation energy, and there's lots of rest. I love sleeping for long periods of time and getting up and just feeling like, oh, this is the winter and there's no stress with it. Summer is a different energy. It's like, I'll be the summer when we get to summer. Right
Yes.
now, I'm winter. So
So we
perhaps
had a
that
we had a good pleasure experience in the summer, didn't we?
we sure did. We sure did. We were at the summer solstice.
Summer solstice. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was good.
But yes, it's like over to you on that. It's like there's seasons and there's cycles of timing,
Yes. So
right?
I love. So of course I have all the medical background for understanding all the symptoms, and there are about, I don't know, between 25 and 100 different symptoms you can have, because estrogen or estradiol in particular affects every single cell in the body. Because when you are, it's designed to help a woman produce life, what you haven't been through, but what I have been through several times. And everything has to change: your heart capacity, your insulin, every system has to change in order to produce this baby inside, which is a total miracle. Which means estrogen is this, it's like a management or like a director hormone that switches things on and off at the right time. So when that falls away, every single organ and cell in your body has to change from a more, well, has to stop listening to estrogen because there's not enough of it, and has to start thinking for itself in a way, and listening to other hormones that come more online, like testosterone. Is actually becomes a little bit more, it doesn't go up, but it doesn't go down either, which means that if the estrogen goes down in balance, we become a little bit more masculine, and that's often why the libido doesn't actually change, because testosterone is also part of libido. So, but to talk about that change, it is really a change from summer to winter to a degree. And it doesn't mean there isn't another, because another nice way of looking at it, there is another spring. Because if you kind of, you can also see it as spring is your adolescence, then summer is the kind of mothering or the 30s, 20s and 30s. And then there is an autumn or a fall season where things are falling away, energy levels are dropping, things are changing, leaves, falling off, changing color, all these things. So I really like to liken the perimenopause to the autumn season, when really we have to draw inwards, energy levels drop. It can get very stormy. It can, and I like to have this thing as the leaves don't always drop off until there's a blasting storm, until there is some real high energy. And that's the rages you can get, or the real, almost like the unhinged, what is happening? And you're like throwing it all out, and then that makes way for the depth of the menopause can be quite a wintering phase where you really have to lean into rest, lean into intuition, lean into that soil, that depth, that nourishment that you can get from the earth, but only if you allow it. Because if you're out there running around like somebody in summer, and you're keeping all the lights on, and you're keeping you're keeping everything energized, you're not going to get that nourishment that you need for that transformation and your body to adjust. Because then once you're through it, and you have experienced this, there is a second spring. You have been planting seeds because you kind of know, you've been trying to work out what's the next phase, and you've been planting seeds for that, and then they will start growing. So you will be a different, it's almost like you've been this tree, and then actually you've dropped some acorns or whatever it might be. They had to then be in the earth for a bit before another and different type of tree, different size, a different, it would look differently, but it will start growing again, and you'll get a whole new different type of vitality that comes out as like a second spring almost. And then you go through the whole cycle again in a way, but it's hormonally flatter. You don't get the ups and downs of a normal cycle anymore. So it is a different phase, but you're still, in our current culture and with our current life expectancy, still really far away from the real next final winter. Because
Yeah.
you're still kind of going to be building, you're going to have another summer of what you're feeling all this excitement of new ideas and new possibilities, and changing your business over to something else again, and that will grow and grow and go for quite a while. And it's only really much later, when we're really starting to face that we are in human physical bodies that will end, that there is actually another kind of falling away autumn phase, which will be different. Who knows what that will be like? But I really like to use the seasons for that. And also the thing is, if we've been able to see our cycles as seasons every month, then we are much more prepared and much more understanding of how this phase of about 10 years is actually an autumn phase. And that's fine. It can be wonderful, beautiful skies, and even in winter, I love, here in the Northern Hemisphere at least, the low sunlight.
Oh, I
The
love it too.
skies are just
Looking out,
stunning.
it's so beautiful.
It is so
Yeah.
beautiful.
Well, this is it. And old age is so beautiful. I mean, it's also, but that's not what menopause is. It's got nothing really to do with that. And I think that's the misunderstanding. And we need
It's
to
got nothing to
stand
do
up.
with old age. It's
No,
midlife. It's
it's
a midpoint
midlife.
almost.
Actually,
Yeah.
a very good friend of mine, her mother said, not to me, but to her, that she'd always had amazing sex with her husband, but the best was after she had menopause, because they stopped worrying about her getting pregnant, and there was like
Yes.
one less worry. And so that was really interesting. She's a very down to earth, she's no longer with us, she's on the other side now, but she was a very down to earth, ordinary, salt of the earth woman saying that, not
Yes.
some prima donna character who was all about sex. She was like, best sex after menopause. So
Yeah, and actually that makes me think of a lot of women, and each to their own, and everybody has their own path and their own way of dealing with this. But there's also now much more noise and a bit of a myth that without HRT or without hormones, which are now pretty natural, actually, the ones that you can, put in the gel or in the patches, they are identical to your body's own hormone. But using that is still, it's never going to give you the same energy, the high levels that you had in your midlife, in your youth, in your 30s or in your 20s. So it is kind of artificially giving you a little bit of a cushioning of estrogen, which may suit people. But what we're saying is, or what I'm saying is, it's not necessary. It's not the only way to find, sexual liberation or just pleasure and a deepening of your sexual experience. You don't need that necessarily, and it's not only the women on HRT who remain vital and sexy and attractive. That's complete nonsense, a myth, I would say.
I hope we've busted some myths today. And if you aren't in a relationship and you don't have a partner for Valentine's Day, then I suggest you honor yourself. Buy yourself some flowers, get a hold of the oil, go and ritualize your sexuality. Like, actually enjoy just playing, just the way we were when we were teenagers. In a way, that's the kind of menopausal experience I've had. You have got less responsibilities in some way, so go be like the teenager. Be a bit decadent, be a bit naughty, find the words that you can use.
Oh, the images.
And the images, and go and have some fun. And one of the things that this oil does do is it causes lubrication because it's an oil, right? But unlike lube, which some people use for, let's say they use it for, because they use condoms, they want a water-based lube. This is not meant to replace lube. It is actually, it's the beginning of the hint of foreplay. That's how the aphrodisiac works. And then you should cause your own lubrication. And at that point, you can bring in the water-based lube if you're using rubbers, because this is just, you don't need that much of it. So that's just a kind of practical thing. But it really is like, go and play again. Go and
Yes.
remind yourself what it's all about all over your body. And
Yes.
just to say to Joe that if anybody wants to be in touch with somebody who's a menopause expert, Joe is that. And so any women who are thinking about, they've got bigger concerns, we will put the contact details for Joe so you can contact her all about anything that you want. She's got loads of programs that she runs. And from my perspective, it's just this simple. Just try the oil. Just see what happens. That's my message at this point. Valentine's Day. Buy one for yourself. Buy for a girlfriend. Ask your husband to buy for you. That kind of thing. And get it
Yes.
on. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Very good. And it plays on that. What's also so important in this phase is the lightness and the play. We get so serious about life. Goodness me. And actually, it was never meant to be all serious and sensible. And there is always that lightheartedness. Anything could happen anytime. So
Yeah.
let's not take ourselves too
Where'd she
seriously. And
go?
then with that, we
Well,
can
just on that funny
we
ending,
can
it was
really
not meant to
sense the
be
fun.
serious. So I will end this recording for both of us. I don't know what's happened. Her reception, sometimes she's in Cornwall. But yeah, just to say, come on, ladies, playtime. And loved having this conversation. And we will see you again for one of the other ones, because there's several for this Valentine's Day experience. And I just want you to enjoy them. Over and out.